My name is Patricia Lane, and I was only 12 years old when everything in my life turned upside down. That morning started like any other day. Dad kissed my forehead, smiled gently, and left the house to head to the construction site. He was a site supervisor for a civil construction company in Oregon. I still clearly remember the denim jacket he wore and how he said, "I'll bring home your favorite pastry this afternoon." That was the last thing I ever heard from him. Mom didn't even look up when Dad walked out the door. Her eyes were glued to her phone, fingers scrawling endlessly like she was drowning in an infinite stream of news. That struck me as odd. They used to talk every morning, exchange warm glances. Lately, the silence between them had stretched longer, like a void I couldn't fill. By noon, while I was sitting in science class, the principal walked in. Her face was serious, but her eyes held a deep sympathy. I was called outside, not knowing what was happening. In the principal's office, my mom was already there. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup untouched, and her cold eyes looked at me like I was a stranger. "Your father is gone, Patricia," she said in a disturbingly calm voice. I froze. It felt like the air around me had disappeared. I screamed on the inside, but on the outside, all I could do was cry, choked and silent. Mom placed her hand lightly on my shoulder, patting it as if she were comforting an acquaintance, not the only daughter who had just lost her father. That night, I went up to my room early but couldn't sleep. I heard Mom on the phone downstairs. Her voice was low, but every word came through the thin walls of our house. "Actually, this might be a good opportunity," she said, pausing for a moment. "Being a widow is better than being divorced. At least I get to keep everything without sharing with lawyers." Then she laughed, a short, sharp laugh like a knife's edge. I couldn't believe my ears. My father had only been gone for a few hours, and yet my mother, the woman who had held his hand through years of marriage, was saying such things without an ounce of sorrow, without a single real tear. I sat on the stairs, my hand covering my mouth to stifle the sobs, my heart aching as if it were being crushed. The only one who sensed the truth was Aunt Margaret, Dad's sister. She didn't sob loudly at the funeral, didn't offer hollow condolences like the others. She just stood quietly in the backyard, shaking her head gently whenever someone hugged my mom and said, "Poor thing." Aunt Margaret had known all along. She'd seen how Mom treated Dad, the disdain in her words when he lost his job temporarily, the irritated glances when he came home late after overtime shifts, but no one wanted to believe it. My mother always appeared polished, knew just the right words to say to fool people. Only Aunt Margaret and I saw how everything was falling apart beneath the surface. After the funeral, Mom transformed. No longer tired or sorrowful, no more red eyes. She dressed more extravagantly, wore heavier makeup, and was constantly on the phone. I once caught her tearing up a family photo with Dad in it, then tossing it into the trash without a second thought. That time, I didn't cry. I just stood there, eyes dry, because even my tears seemed to understand there was no place left for them. I had lost the person I loved most, but what hurt more was realizing I never really had a mother. 4 months after the funeral, Mom casually announced she was remarrying. She didn't sit me down or ask how I felt. She stood in the kitchen, stirring her morning coffee, and said it as if she were announcing the weather. "Patricia, Daniel and I are getting married at the end of the month." I froze in place. The spoon in my hand dropped to the floor with a cold clang. Daniel Morrison, the man who had shown up at our house a few times after Dad passed. At first, he just came by to help Mom cope with her grief, but over time, he appeared more frequently, even bringing his 2 kids, Chase, 14, and Kayla, 11. Chase always looked at me like I was from another planet, while Kayla rarely spoke, just quietly assessed me head to toe whenever her mom signaled her. I used to think I was imagining it. I wasn't. The wedding was a private ceremony in a small garden outside Boise, Idaho. I had no role in the event, wasn't asked about the dress, seating, or even if I wanted to go. Mom simply handed me a pale pink dress, and coldly said, "Don't embarrass me." After the honeymoon, Daniel and his kids moved into my house, or rather, the house that used to belong to my dad. That's when everything changed, in ways I couldn't have imagined. Kayla was given my bedroom because, as Mom put it, she's a girl and she needs space to paint. I was moved to the attic, a cramped room with rough wooden walls and a single window that was jammed shut. Chase took over my dad's study, once filled with books and sketches. It became his game room. I protested, gently. Mom responded curtly, "You need to learn to share. The world doesn't revolve around you." Every night, dinner felt like a stage play where I was just an extra. Mom filled Kayla's plate, saved the last piece of chicken for Chase while I quietly ate cold salad. When I asked, "May I have some more potatoes?" she shrugged. "You've had enough." Weekend trips began. Camping, canoeing, national park visits. I was never invited. Mom explained, "You're not into outdoor activities. Stay home and watch the cat." So I stayed, with Ginger the cat, and the growing feeling of being left behind. I called Aunt Margaret more often. Nights at her house felt like breathing again. She didn't ask many questions, just handed me a warm blanket, a cup of hot cocoa, and listened in silence. Once, while I was stacking clothes in her room, she asked softly, "Are you okay with how things are at home?" I didn't know what to say. Some truths, once spoken, hurt more than when kept inside. I just bowed my head and mumbled, "At least, I have a real bedroom here." She squeezed my hand. Her eyes held no anger, no pity, just a deep understanding that made me want to cry. One Friday afternoon, I came home from school and saw Mom and Kayla sitting together in the living room. The table was covered with markers and drawing paper. They were laughing. Mom gently untangled Kayla's hair from her sweater, smiling like I didn't even exist. That image froze me at the doorway, my chest hollow. "Patricia, walk softer," Mom snapped. "Kayla needs to concentrate." I turned away and quietly climbed the stairs to the sweltering attic. No lock on the door, no one to check on me. Just me and the wind whistling through the jammed window. That night, I pulled out a small notebook and wrote my first line. "I will not be forgotten. Not like this." I started thinking about college when I turned 17. Late afternoons in the school library, I sat alone researching business schools, scholarship programs, and dreaming of a life I could finally control. A life where I wouldn't be shoved into attics or called the extra problem, in a family I never chose. One evening, while Mom was baking for Kayla's upcoming birthday party, I gathered my courage and stepped into the kitchen. The scent of butter and vanilla lingered in the air, clashing with the heaviness in my chest. "Mom," I said, trying to stay calm, "I want to apply to the University of Minnesota. They have a great business program, and I've almost finished my application." She stopped, turned to look at me, not with surprise or emotion, but with visible irritation. "Patricia, where do you think the money for college is going to come from?" She set the cake pan on the counter, wiping her hands on her apron. "Chase is starting senior year, Kayla's got real artistic talent, and I'm planning to enroll her in an art academy out of state. You need to be realistic." I bit my lip. "What about Dad's savings?" I remember he once said. Mom frowned and cut me off with a sigh. "Are you still stuck on that? Your father didn't leave anything. Whatever was in the savings account was used for hospital bills, the funeral, and living expenses all these years. Did you think food, clothes, and a roof over your head were free?" I stood frozen, not because of her answer, but because of how she said it. As if my very existence was a burden. Still, I didn't give up. That weekend, I went to Aunt Margaret's house as usual. She made peppermint tea and the cookies still smelled fresh from the oven. We sat on the porch swing where the late afternoon sunlight stretched across the lawn like a soft blanket. I told her everything, about the conversation with Mom, about my dream of going to college, and the lingering doubt I had about the money Dad once said was set aside for me. Aunt Margaret stayed silent for a moment, then stood up and went inside. I waited, clutching my now cold teacup. When she came back, she held a small old metal box, secured with a tiny latch. "I've been keeping this for 5 years," she said, her voice low but warm. "Before your father passed, he came to see me. He was worried. He said things were changing at home and he didn't want to take any risks." My eyes widened as she handed me the box. Inside was a thick envelope, sealed tightly with tape. My hands trembled as I opened it. A bank statement fell out, and my heart pounded. Over $72,000 in the account. The beneficiary, me. The assigned trustee, Margaret Lane. "Your dad had been putting money into that account for years," Aunt Margaret said, looking at me with love. "He didn't say why exactly, but when I heard he passed and saw how things changed with your mom, I knew why he did it." I was speechless, tears threatening to spill. Part of me wanted to break down, but another part felt a surge of strength. Dad hadn't abandoned me. Even when he was gone, he was still protecting me in the quietest way. "Don't tell your mother," Aunt Margaret warned, her voice firm. "If she finds out, she'll find a way to take it. From now on, you have to keep this completely secret." I nodded. For the first time in years, hope didn't feel like a luxury. That night, I sat by Aunt Margaret's window, moonlight reflecting off the bank document in my hands. Those cold numbers now held the deepest kind of love. I didn't know what lay ahead, but I knew one thing for sure. I would fight for my future, and I would never let anyone, not even my mother, take that from me again. I kept the money a secret, just as Aunt Margaret told me to. During my senior year, I poured everything into school. Every morning, I woke up earlier than my alarm, did extra assignments, applied for scholarships, and practiced writing essays like my life depended on every word. In truth, it did. At school, Chase still made sarcastic remarks when I brought packed lunches or wore the same old jacket. "Don't worry, Patricia," he once sneered. "They still need cashiers." Kayla frequently posted pictures of the happy family online, pictures I was never in. I stayed silent, as always, because I knew I was preparing for something far greater than anything they could ever imagine. That spring, when I turned 18, I received my acceptance letter from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, majoring in business administration. I also earned a partial scholarship thanks to my grades and an essay about my determination to build a life on my own terms. I didn't show the acceptance letter to my mom. Instead, I quietly planned my departure, with Aunt Margaret's help and the money my dad had saved for me. 3 months later, I left the house where I had lived like a shadow. No farewell party, no hug. Mom just asked flatly, "Are you sure you can handle living on your own?" I smiled, nodded, and walked out the door, feeling as though I had just removed a weight I'd carried for years. College life wasn't easy, but I loved every moment of independence. I worked at a cafe near the dorms, joined academic clubs, and never passed up an internship opportunity. That's where I met Jessica Ward, a classmate whose personality was the opposite of mine. Bold, energetic, but incredibly kind. One time, while working on a marketing strategy project together, Jessica invited me to her house to prepare our presentation. I didn't expect the house to be a 3-story mansion in suburban Madison, and I certainly didn't expect her father to be Malcolm Ward, CEO of a well-known marketing firm called Ward & Cole Strategies. After our rehearsal, Mr. Ward overheard us practicing. He stepped into the room, nodded approvingly, and asked me a few questions about my market analysis. He didn't say much then, but a week later, Jessica handed me his business card and said, "My dad wants to meet you. I think he's looking for interns." That summer, I started my internship at Ward & Cole. At first, I handled small tasks, compiling data, assisting with events, making coffee. But I observed, learned, and stayed late whenever I could. When a senior employee suddenly left, I volunteered to finish her unfinished market report. That report caught Mr. Ward's attention. After graduation, I was offered a full-time position. I began as a market analyst. 4 years later, I became regional strategy lead. By year 6, I was promoted to Director of Strategic Development. At just 24 years old, every step was deliberate, each small win a brick laid in the foundation of my new life. I bought my first apartment in downtown Milwaukee. I picked out the furnishings myself. Minimalist, elegant, and nothing excessive. Then came the Mercedes-Benz GLC, a reward I gave myself after exceeding performance goals. But unlike Kayla or Chase, I didn't post photos for attention. I didn't need to. I only shared a few pictures with Aunt Margaret, the only one who knew my entire journey. She always replied, "Your father would be so proud." And I never once doubted you'd make it. I still keep a journal. Whenever I feel tired or uncertain, I open the old notebook, where Dad's handwriting is on the first page. No matter where you go, I believe you'll get to where you dream to be. Now, I'm there. The very place I once dreamed of, doubted, and fought to reach. I never returned to the old house. I hadn't heard a word from Mom, Chase, or Kayla in 6 years. Until one June morning when a strange message appeared in my voicemail, with a voice I couldn't mistake. "Patricia, it's Mom. I have something I want to talk to you about." The message came at 7 a.m., on the same day I was promoted to Regional Vice President at Ward & Cole. As I sipped my coffee on the balcony, watching Milwaukee awaken below, my phone buzzed with a simple notification. "Patricia, I'm having my 55th birthday party at Belle Rive Restaurant, Saturday, 7 p.m. You should be there. Don't make people think I didn't raise you right." No warm greeting, no explanation, just a cold demand. Exactly how she used to control my life when I was a child. Even the way she wrote "you should be there" made me laugh. Like nothing had happened all those years, like I was still stuck in the attic eating dinner alone. I planned to delete the message, but part of me, not to forgive, but to prove something, wanted to see the look on her face when she realized the daughter she once abandoned had grown up. That afternoon, I sat with Aunt Margaret in the living room, recounting the message with a smirk. She set her teacup down, watching me for a long moment. "Are you going to go?" I nodded. I don't want anything from her, but I think it's time she saw the truth she's been denying all these years. Aunt Margaret raised an eyebrow. "So, what are you going to give her?" I opened my phone and showed Aunt Margaret a confirmation email. A 3-month luxury vacation at a 6-star resort in Iceland, first-class tickets, full-service package. Total cost, $180,000. Aunt Margaret nearly dropped her glasses. "Goodness, Patricia!" I gave a soft smile. She'll never receive this trip. But I just want to see her reaction. Just once. On Saturday evening, I chose a simple black dress from a brand most people unfamiliar with fashion would mistake for something cheap. I took a taxi to Belle Rive, a fancy-looking restaurant, but I knew the truth. The food was average at best, and the price was inflated by chandeliers and background violin music. The private dining room was decorated with candles and elegant fake flowers. My mother sat in the center, her sequin dress sparkling, makeup flawless down to every detail. Next to her was Daniel, still as dull as ever. Chase and Kayla flanked them, beaming in designer outfits, acting like movie stars. When she saw me, Mom narrowed her eyes, then forced a social smile. "Oh, Patricia, you showed up on time. At least you still remember your manners." I didn't respond. I just smiled and walked toward an empty seat at the end of the table. The party unfolded like a stage play. Relatives gave ordinary gifts, which my mother praised like they were treasures. A scarf, a cosmetic set, a shopping voucher. Then it was Chase and Kayla's turn. They stood hand in hand, confidently presenting their gift like they were delivering a graduation speech. "Mom," Chase began, "Kayla and I saved up all year to get you something really special." Kayla held up her phone, showing a picture of a brand new massage chair already set up in the living room. Mom clutched her chest and feigned being overwhelmed. "Oh my! You two are the most thoughtful children in the world." Then her gaze drifted toward me. "And what about you, Patricia? I'm not expecting much, maybe a card or a handkerchief. I calmly opened my handbag, took out a small blue box neatly wrapped with a white ribbon. I pushed it toward her. Just open it and see. She took the box and glanced at it like she was judging a last-minute bargain bin item. When she opened it and saw the slip of paper inside, she frowned. What is this? I sat up straight. A reservation confirmation for Aurora Blue Resort in Iceland. 3 weeks, full-service package, first-class tickets. That's my birthday gift to you. The room fell silent. Kayla dropped her spoon, Chase's eyes widened, and Daniel stopped chewing his cake. Mom looked at the paper, then at me. Are you joking? Where did you get the money for this? I smiled, my gaze steady. I am the Regional Development Vice President at Ward & Cole. I live downtown, and the taxi I took tonight was so I didn't have to worry about parking my new Lexus I bought last week. Her face froze. No more smiling, no more sarcasm. Only shock. I stood up, gently took the box back and placed it in my bag. But you're right, if you think this gift isn't valuable enough, I'll give it to someone who truly deserves it. I turned and walked away, my heels clicking clearly across the silent room. Outside the restaurant, the summer breeze brushed through my hair. I took out my phone and sent one message to Aunt Margaret. The trip to Iceland is yours. I left Belrive behind in a heavy silence, walking away from the stunned stares of my mother and the family, who never really saw me as one of them. That night, I didn't go straight home. I stopped by Aunt Margaret's, where the lights were still on and a cup of hot tea was already waiting, as if she had known exactly how the evening would unfold. I told her everything, the way my mother belittled the gift before opening it, her shock when she saw its real value, and what I said before leaving. Aunt Margaret didn't laugh, but her eyes shimmered with pride. You did what most people never dare to, place your own worth above fake approval. I nodded, feeling lighter. I don't need her apology. I just need her silence. But silence didn't come the way I hoped. The next morning, as I was getting ready for work, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. 3 missed calls from an unknown number. Then a message arrived. Patricia, we need to talk. About last night. And about us. I didn't reply. An hour later, another call. This time from Daniel's number. I had forgotten he still used the same one. Then Kayla called. Chase sent a message. Mom is really upset. Maybe our little sister didn't need to go that far. Little sister. The phrase sounded so fake. I was never his sister, never treated like family. Yet now he used such a familiar tone, like the past never happened. That afternoon during a strategic meeting, my mother sent a long email titled in bold, "For the family." She claimed the party had been a misunderstanding, that I had overreacted, and that she wanted to start over if I truly wished to reconnect. But just a few lines later, the truth leaked out. She mentioned how Kayla really needs an internship at a reputable company to enhance her college applications, and how Chase has great business potential but needs guidance. Then, she added, if you know anyone hiring at your company, consider referring Chase. He has excellent leadership skills. I read the whole email without feeling anything, not anger, not sadness, just the sense that I was reading a shallow investment proposal, flowery language, but completely hollow. The next day, I blocked every number from my mother's family. I filtered their emails, I changed my social media privacy settings, and told our office security team that anyone with the last name Morrison should not be allowed in. Late that evening, Aunt Margaret called, her voice hesitant. Patricia, your mother came to my house this morning. I paused for a few seconds. What did she say? She wanted your address, said she had the right to see you, that a mother shouldn't be treated like a stranger by her own child. I told her she gave up that right a long time ago. I closed my eyes, imagining her standing on Aunt Margaret's porch, wearing her designer dress, makeup flawless, gripping her purse like she was bidding at an auction. Did she do anything outrageous? I asked. She did. She yelled in the street, accusing me of dividing the family, that I was selfish, and that everything she ever did was to help you succeed. I let out a quiet laugh. Succeed by locking me in an attic? I told her that. She went quiet for a while, then left, but Patricia, the look in her eyes, I think she's truly desperate this time. I didn't know what emotion I was feeling. Sadness? Pity? Or just the numbness of years of abandonment? But I knew one thing for sure. No amount of late tears could erase years of being forgotten. And coming back just for benefits could never be called love. That night, I sat alone on my sofa, gazing out at the city through my large window. I reopened the Iceland vacation email and updated the recipient's name. Margaret Lane. I added a small note. For the one woman who chose to stay, even when the world turned away. When I hit send, I wasn't just giving away a gift. I was closing a chapter of my life and stepping into the next one with my head held high. Margaret's trip to Iceland was scheduled for early September, right during the most breathtaking season of the Northern Lights. When I told her, she nearly dropped her glass. You're kidding, Patricia? Iceland? A 6-star resort? Oh my goodness, I've never even left this state. I smiled, laying the printed flight tickets and itinerary on the wooden kitchen table. No kidding. You deserve all the best things. And more. Aunt Margaret went quiet for a moment, then looked at me with an expression I'll never forget. One filled with unconditional love, pride, and deep gratitude. No fancy words, no tears. Just a warm squeeze of my hand, and it was enough. Since the night of my mother's birthday party, I had erased every trace of the past. Phone numbers, email addresses, even old belongings from the house. I had given them away or thrown them out. Not out of bitterness, but because I didn't want to hold on to anything that reminded me of a place where I felt invisible. I focused on my work and on the relationships that truly mattered. I spent more time with Aunt Margaret, cooking together on weekends, taking morning walks around Lake Geneva every Sunday. Those seemingly simple things made me feel more loved than any empty words ever spoken by the woman who used to call herself my mother. A week before the trip, I scheduled a private car to pick Aunt Margaret up at the airport, hired a local guide so she could fully enjoy everything without worry, and even booked a full-body spa session at the hotel she'd be staying in, with a view that looked out to snow-covered mountains year-round. Aunt Margaret couldn't stop laughing as I listed the plans. You're turning me into royalty. I just smiled and said softly, I'm only giving back a small piece of what you gave me. During that time, I didn't receive any more messages or calls from my mother. Maybe she finally understood that this time I had truly closed the door. No more soft spots, no second chances. Her silence was the most valuable thing she had ever given me. The day before her departure, I gave Aunt Margaret a teal silk scarf, the color of the Northern Lights I had seen in pictures. She hugged me tightly, eyes glistening. Your father must be looking down and smiling. I nodded. I believe that, too. That evening, I sat alone in my apartment, city lights twinkling behind the glass window. I pulled out my old notebook, the one I started when I was just a girl banished to the attic, and read the first line I ever wrote. I will not be forgotten, not like this. Now, I added a new line below it. And I wasn't forgotten. I created my own place, right where I belong. I closed my eyes. I no longer felt heavy or bitter. Instead, I felt peace. Like I had finally taken off the weighty coat of the past. The next morning, I dropped Aunt Margaret off at the airport. She rolled her suitcase, the teal scarf wrapped around her neck, chattering about the weather in Reykjavik and whether she should eat breakfast on the plane or at the terminal. Before entering the security checkpoint, she looked back at me, her eyes gleaming like a child about to go to summer camp. You know, Patricia, I always hoped that one day you'd live up to your full potential, but I never imagined you'd be the one helping me live my own dream. I hugged her tightly. Because you were the first person who believed in me when no one else did. She walked away, her small figure gradually disappearing behind the line of passengers. I stood there for a while, then turned and walked out of the airport, my heart light. I didn't have a big, loud family or picture-perfect posts on social media, but I had one person who was always there for me, someone who chose me every single day, not for gain, not for appearances, but simply out of love. And sometimes just one person like that is enough to be called family. From a forgotten girl living quietly in an attic, I had risen and built a life I'm truly proud of. I learned that family isn't about blood. It's about those who choose to love and stand by you unconditionally. Success doesn't come from others' approval, but from daring to believe in your own worth. And sometimes, finding happiness means having the courage to let go of what once hurt you. What do you think about Patricia's story and her courageous choices? Share your thoughts below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more heartwarming and meaningful stories about family and life. I never thought the day would come when I'd become invisible in the very home I carefully maintained, corner by corner. Yet it happened, slowly, quietly, like a photograph fading under the sun. No one in the family noticed, but every glance, every offhand comment slowly pushed me to the margins of my own life. My name is Linda. This morning, when I placed a plate of freshly baked cookies on the kitchen counter, my daughter, Amber, who just turned 16, barely raised an eyebrow toward her best friend and casually said, "Mom, can you please stop hovering? We're trying to study." The words hit like a rock. I still smiled, pushing the plate toward them. "I just thought you girls might want a snack." Amber shook her head, not even looking up from her book. "Mom, seriously, who even moms like this anymore? You're always baking, like it's some 1950s movie or something." I caught the uncomfortable glance from Chloe, her best friend, as she reached for a cookie. At least someone still knew how to be polite. "Your mom's cookies are actually really good," Chloe said softly. "Yeah, well, that's all she really does. Dad says she's lucky he makes enough so she can just hang out in the kitchen all day," Amber replied in a flat tone, as if I wasn't standing right there. That comment sliced through me like a cold, thin blade. But I didn't show it. I wiped the counter and nodded like everything was just fine. My phone buzzed in my pocket, probably Daniel, my assistant, updating me on the progress of a company acquisition. I quickly slipped it back into my jacket. "I'm heading out for a bit, got some errands. You girls be careful." Amber didn't even look up, just waved a hand dismissively. Yeah, sure. I'm sure you're super busy with stuff." I stepped outside and closed the door behind me, exhaling deeply, like I was releasing 100 pounds off my chest. If Amber only knew, I wasn't heading to the grocery store like she assumed, but to my private office downtown, where I was running a tech empire and preparing to acquire one of the industry's top companies. Who knows what she'd say? They know nothing. All they see is a woman who cooks, does laundry, makes dinner, and keeps everything at home running. To them, that's all I am. Amber once told her friend I spend all day watching cooking shows and trying to copy recipes. Well, that's not entirely wrong. I did learn to make mousse from one of those episodes. But I was also closing an investor deal in Silicon Valley at the same time. And Brian, my husband, he proudly calls himself the provider, the breadwinner, the one steering the ship. He's never asked how the bills are always paid on time or who bought Amber that new laptop when his credit card was maxed out. I've played the role of the perfect wife for so long, even I started to forget who I really am. But not anymore. Because when a $32 million contract is waiting for my signature, one that will send waves through the industry, Amber's snide remarks and Brian's dismissive glances no longer carry weight. I gripped the steering wheel tighter as I pulled into the private parking garage. The office nameplate, LM Holdings, glinted under the sunlight. Its glass walls reflected a woman who no longer wore a flour-stained apron, but one silently commanding an empire. And I'm ready for the day they find out the truth. But before that happens, I still have a few more batches of cookies to bake. The lazy housewife is about to show them who's really holding this family together. My office sits on the 29th floor of a glass high-rise in downtown Austin, Texas. From up here, the cars below look like ants, people like dots on a board. Up here, I'm not the overlooked mother, not the wife tagged with the word lucky. Up here, I'm Linda Morgan, CEO and founder of Orion Ventures, one of the fastest-growing private tech firms in the country, and the secret force preparing to acquire Cybernova Inc., the leading name in artificial intelligence. They still haven't figured out who's behind the acquisition, right? I asked as I walked in, removing my sunglasses and coat. Ethan, our chief strategist and my longtime business partner, sat waiting with 2 coffees. He raised an eyebrow and grinned. No suspicion at all. Cybernova's exec still thinks it's some anonymous New York investment group. Pretty sure he never imagined the person behind it all was a mom who bakes. I gave a small smile, settled into my chair and glanced over the screen. The latest email read, "Final negotiation round approved, 68% equity acquisition of Cybernova." One more step, and everything I've built in silence over the past 7 years will reach its peak. And you're sure there's no trace back to Orion as the parent company? I asked without taking my eyes off the data. Positive. Shell companies, bridge funds. Everything is clean. We're still a ghost, Ethan replied, placing a folder on my desk. But there's something else. It seems Cybernova's chairman, Derek Vaughn, is getting suspicious. He started probing through our intermediary bank. The name Derek Vaughn sent a chill down my spine, but I quickly regained composure. He was the type of man who believed women shouldn't be at major deal tables. I still remember the first time I met him at a tech summit in San Diego. I posed as a small-time investor pitching a new algorithm idea. Derek laughed in front of the entire room and said, "You should stick to taking care of your family. This stuff isn't for cookie-baking moms." I smiled and remembered every word. If he digs too deep, we could be at risk. Ethan nodded. Should we go public? Hit them with a direct strike? I paused, then shook my head. Not yet. I'm not ready for my family to know. Amber and Brian still think I just scheduled dental appointments and change paper towels. I let out a dry chuckle, but my eyes stayed sharp. When the truth comes out, I don't want them just shocked. I want them to reflect. Ethan stood. Understood. I'll make sure everything stays on course. But one more thing. Derek's planning a closed-door shareholders meeting this Friday. Sounds like he's getting ready to make a move first. I leaned on the desk, my gaze cutting through the glass. Friday? Good. Schedule Orion's board meeting that morning. And Ethan, invite Derek Vaughn. He likes surprises, doesn't he? Ethan chuckled and nodded, then exited the room. I leaned back in my chair, watching the project maps glowing on the big screen. Each dot was a deal I closed, each line a strategy executed in the shadows. For 7 years, I'd been both the mother who never missed dinner and the woman signing million-dollar contracts during lunch breaks. No one asked, no one suspected. And that's been my greatest advantage. The phone rang. Julie, my assistant, calling from downstairs. "Ma'am, Brian just called. He said he'll be home late tonight. Big meeting. Oh, and he asked if you could iron a few new shirts for him." I checked the time. 3:47 p.m. Thank you, Julie. Tell him I'll take care of it. As always. I hung up, picked up a pen, and wrote a single line in my notebook. Prepare for the reveal Friday. Family must be present. They've lived in the dark long enough. I smiled, regaining my composure, and began planning the most memorable family lunch they would ever experience. None of them, not Brian, not Amber, and certainly not Derek Vaughn, could imagine that the woman they thought only knew how to bake was actually holding the future of the entire tech industry in her hands. That evening, as I laid dinner on the table like always, Amber was buried in her phone, and Brian was absorbed in a printed financial report from work, not even glancing at the roast I had spent the entire afternoon preparing. "Can we all pause for a moment and listen to Mom?" I said gently, pouring lemonade into Amber's glass. Brian sighed but folded his paper. Amber didn't even look up. "Is this about me using my phone at the table again?" "No, I just want us to do something special together this week," I said, keeping my voice steady. "What, exactly?" Brian asked, already looking at his phone. "This Friday. I made lunch reservations downtown. It's a very special place. I want the whole family to come." Amber frowned. "Mom, I have dance rehearsal that afternoon. Probably can't make it." "You can skip just one. I already spoke with your coach and she agreed." I smiled, hiding my nerves. Amber's head snapped up. "You did what? You talked to her without asking me first?" Brian chimed in. "And I have a board meeting at lunch." I gently placed my fork down. "You don't. Your schedule is open. I called your assistant before making the reservation." Brian looked up, visibly thrown off. "You? Called my assistant?" "I wanted to make sure we could all be there," I replied calmly. Amber narrowed her eyes at me. "So you've planned everything already, and we're just supposed to go along with it like it's the 1950s? I looked at her. Behind the protest, I could already see it. The curiosity blooming. "Trust me, this lunch will be unforgettable." Wednesday morning, I received an email from Ethan. "Derek Vaughn is holding an emergency press conference this afternoon. Looks like he's about to make his first move." I called Ethan immediately, my voice calm even though my heart was beating faster. "Does he know anything?" "Not sure. But I think he's trying to control the narrative before Orion announces the acquisition." I stood up and walked toward the large window, watching the traffic swirl below like a mess of tangled thoughts. "Let him talk. And Ethan, prepare our press release. But don't publish it until I say. I want to play this big." Ethan hesitated. "Linda, are you sure? If he gets ahead in the media, it might impact the deal's value." "Then, we won't wait until after his press conference. We'll interrupt it." "I'll be there, in the room." "Linda, I won't say a word. Just show up." Right as he's loudly criticizing the anonymous buyer. "Let him see my face. Let him realize he's just been outmaneuvered by the woman he once called a housewife with a hobby for junk stocks." Ethan let out a soft laugh. "You really know how to create a moment." I smiled. I spent 7 years building everything in silence. Now it's time to let the echo speak. That Wednesday afternoon, I walked into the auditorium where the press conference was about to begin, just minutes before Derek took the stage. I sat in the third row, surrounded by reporters and investors. No one recognized me, just a woman in a simple blazer, hair neatly tied, holding a notepad. Derek appeared, launching into his speech with full confidence, hands gesturing emphatically with each point. "And I want to make it clear that we are not easily deceived by anonymous entities, especially inexperienced players trying to elbow their way into major league deals." I crossed my legs, leaned back in my seat, and didn't take my eyes off him. As the speech transitioned into blame, criticism, and doubts about the legitimacy of the deal, I stood up. Calmly, I stepped out of the row and walked straight down the center aisle, each click of my heels against the floor sharp as a ticking clock. Derek saw me. He froze mid-sentence, eyes widening with a flicker of unmistakable panic. I offered only a small smile and a slight nod. No words were necessary. I walked out of the room under his stunned gaze and the murmurs trailing behind me. That evening, I sent a message to Ethan. "Media update. Release the official statement confirming Orion Ventures' acquisition of 68% of Cybernova. Include the CEO's name. And Ethan, attach a photo from today's press conference." The game had begun. And I, the woman everyone thought was only good at baking cookies, had just made a move no one saw coming. Friday, 11:45 a.m. The black SUV rolled slowly into the Orion Tower parking garage, the private entrance reserved for the highest-level executives. Brian sat in the passenger seat, frowning at his surroundings. Amber stayed glued to her phone, typing texts at lightning speed. "This doesn't look much like a restaurant," Brian remarked, glancing at his watch. "Are you sure you didn't get the address wrong?" I just smiled and opened the door. "Let's go. Today's lunch is a little different." Amber stepped out, rolling her eyes. "Please don't tell me you brought us to a bake sale. I'd rather go home. I said nothing, only led them toward the private elevator, swiped my access card and pressed the button for the 34th floor, the very top. When the elevator doors opened, they were met with a sleek marble hallway, leading to a set of large glass doors etched with Orion Ventures Boardroom, Executive Council. Brian stopped short. Linda, what is going on here? You'll find out soon, I replied, pushing the doors open. Inside, time seemed to stand still. All the board members were present. The large display screens were already lit up, showing a slide that read, Orion Cybernova merger. Official announcement. At the head of the table sat one empty chair, the CEO's seat. Derek Vaughn stood near a legal aid, his face flushing bright red as soon as he saw me. Brian and Amber were stunned speechless. I walked straight to the head of the table, paused, and turned to face my family. Everyone, allow me to introduce myself. I'm Linda Morgan, CEO and founder of Orion Ventures, and the person who's been overseeing the acquisition of Cybernova for the past year. Amber dropped her phone. The clatter echoed through the room. She stared at me, wide-eyed, like she was seeing a total stranger. Brian's jaw dropped. You? You're the CEO? Not starting today, since 7 years ago. The air in the room tightened like a drawn bowstring. Derek stepped forward, his voice trying to stay composed. There must be some mistake. She's just a homemaker. I met her at a charity event a few years back. Yes, I nodded. You were the one who laughed when I proposed a capital restructuring idea for your company. Told me I should focus on baking. I turned to Ethan, standing in the corner with his laptop ready. Display the legal documents. Ethan pressed a key. The screens shifted to show a series of digital documents, merger papers, financial statements, recorded negotiation transcripts, and an analysis of suspicious fund transfers from Cybernova's reserve account. Derek Vaughn, I said clearly, we have all the evidence showing you used company assets for personal investments, while reporting losses to shareholders. Derek snapped. You're fabricating this. I pulled a document from the file and slid it across the table to him. Payment bank statement, with your signature. Derek turned to his aide, now pale. The aide gave a reluctant nod, confirming it was real. You have two choices, Derek, I said, my voice calm but sharp. Sign the transfer agreement and step down quietly. Or let the press, the SEC, and your shareholders find out what you did with their pension fund. The room fell silent. You have 30 seconds. Derek looked around, sweat beading on his forehead. He looked at me, then at Amber and Brian, still stunned. Fine, he growled. You win. He grabbed a pen and signed the document with force. Ethan swiftly collected and sealed the papers. I turned to the board. The deal is complete. Orion now officially owns 68% of Cybernova. We're entering a new era. The room erupted in applause, but I didn't look at them. I turned to Brian, the man who thought he was the backbone of the family, and Amber, the daughter who once said all I did was bake cookies. Brian exhaled, voice full of disbelief. How long have you kept this from us? I looked at him. 7 years. 7 years of running a corporation, cooking dinner, attending parent-teacher meetings, and helping with science projects. Amber whispered, Mom, you're a millionaire CEO? I smiled. No, sweetheart, I'm a billionaire. They stared at me in stunned silence, and I stood tall, more confident and steady than ever before. Now they knew. But the real question was, were they ever truly ready to find out who their mother really was? I tilted my head toward the glass window. The city below still buzzed, but on the 34th floor, everything had changed. The room slowly emptied after Derek Vaughn left, signing with defeat heavy on his face. Board members and legal advisors took their turns shaking my hand before exiting, leaving behind a silence so deep you could hear the ticking of the wall clock. Brian and Amber still sat frozen, as if their bodies hadn't caught up with the shock that just hit them. Amber was the first to speak. Her voice was rough, as if it took everything she had just to get the words out. "Mom, I said terrible things to you. I called you lazy, outdated, even made fun of you when you brought cookies to my room." I looked at her, those brown eyes now shimmering with tears, as if, for the first time, she truly saw me. Not the background mom, always available, but the woman behind everything. "I never imagined you were the one behind all of this, that an entire company was holding its breath waiting for your decisions." Ember reached for a tissue, her voice cracking. "I'm really sorry. You didn't deserve to be treated like that." I walked over to her and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "I don't need you to apologize for not knowing. I just need you to understand. Sometimes strength doesn't come from how loud you speak, but from daring to do the unexpected in silence." Amber let out a sob, then threw her arms around me. For the first time in years, that hug wasn't just a child's obligation. It was a real connection, where pride was set aside and understanding began to grow. Brian sat still, hands tightly clasped. He didn't speak until Amber left the room to wash her face. When it was just the two of us, he looked up, his eyes full of fatigue and disbelief. "I don't even know where to begin. Linda, you did all this while I went on thinking I was the one carrying the family." I didn't say a word. I just sat in the chair beside him. "I used to say you were lucky to stay at home. I bragged about my so-called role, while you quietly ran an empire. I wasn't just wrong. I was blind." I looked him in the eye, not with anger, just laying down the truth like a mirror in front of us. "I didn't keep it a secret to beat you, and not to teach anyone a lesson. I kept it because I wanted to be seen as a mom, a wife, without needing a title or numbers to prove my worth. And I never saw that," Brian said, as if admitting something bigger than failure. I let my ego and pride blind me. "Linda, I'm sorry. Not just for not knowing, but for not trying to understand." I gently squeezed his hand. I didn't need to say anything more. Some answers don't require words. Just a deep enough acceptance to begin again. A while later, Amber returned, eyes still red but looking lighter somehow. "So, how long have you been running the company?" she asked, curiosity gleaming behind her gaze, now mixed with something like admiration. "Since you started middle school. Every morning after dropping you off, I'd head to the office. Every evening while making dinner, I was reviewing reports through a wireless earpiece." I smiled. "I never neglected anyone. I just chose to wear more than one hat." "And were you mad that we didn't know?" Amber asked softly. I shook my head. "No, because I understand. We tend to think the people closest to us are the easiest to see, but often they're the ones we overlook the most." The three of us sat in silence for a moment longer in the now empty boardroom, where just minutes ago lights had flashed and tension filled the air. Amber turned to me, half hesitant, half determined. "Can you teach me? Not just about business, but how to be strong. Like you." I smiled, looking at her as if truly seeing her. Not just as a stubborn teenager, but as someone becoming something more. "Of course, but first, do either of you want some lunch?" Brian chuckled softly, standing up with a voice gentler than I'd heard in years. "After today, I think I need more than lunch. I need to relearn how to be the partner you deserve." I wrapped my arm around Amber, looking at them, my family. Now, not perfect, but more honest than ever. Today, the mask I'd worn for 7 years was finally removed, and in the light, what I saw wasn't distance. It was hope. Hope for a new beginning, this time with eyes opened and hearts ready to listen. A week after that fateful meeting, the atmosphere in our home had completely changed. No more indifferent glances at dinner, no more sighs from Brian when I reminded him to help clear the table, and, most importantly, no more snide remarks from Amber every time I walked into her room with a plate of cookies. In their place came questions, curiosity, admiring glances I'd only seen before when Amber talked about social media celebrities. Now, when I stood in the kitchen making dinner, Amber stood beside me. Not to complain, but to observe. "Mom, were you scared when you negotiated with Derek Vaughn?" she asked one evening while I kneaded bread dough. I looked up at her and smiled gently. "Of course, I just didn't show it." Fear is part of stepping into unknown territory, but if you let it take over, you'll never move past your comfort zone. Amber nodded, clearly taking it to heart. "Will you teach me? Everything? How to run a company, how to stay grounded, and how to make sure no one ever underestimates me again." I placed a hand on her shoulder and gave it a light squeeze. "I'll teach you everything, as long as you're willing to learn. But remember, being strong doesn't mean never needing anyone. It means knowing when to stand up and when to listen." Brian changed too. He began listening more, not just at home, but even in our conversations about finances, something he once thought was too complex for women. Now, every morning, he brings me coffee and asks, "What can I help you with today?" A simple question, but each word marks growth. One Monday morning, as I prepared materials for the board meeting, Amber walked into my office holding a notebook. "Mom, I want to work at your company. Not just visit. I want to intern. I know I'm not great yet, but I want to start from the bottom, no special treatment. I want to really learn." I stared at her for a long moment, overwhelmed by a strange mix of pride, surprise, and above all, trust. My daughter finally understood the value of quiet effort. "Then you'll start in market research. No using the last name Morgan. No one at the company will know you're my daughter. Deal?" Amber nodded firmly. "Deal. And Mom, I want to buy my own lunch every day. I don't want anyone thinking I'm being sponsored." I laughed. "All right. But I'm still slipping a cookie into your bag each morning. That's just who I am." The change didn't stop at home. Even the office at Orion felt it. I no longer hid behind vague email aliases or joined meetings with my camera off. I stood before the entire team and introduced myself. Linda Morgan, founder, CEO, and also the mom of a teenage girl who once thought her mother was too boring for social media. I used to stay in the background because I thought successful women would always be judged harder. But today, I choose to show up, not to prove anything, but to remind other women, you don't have to choose between career and family. You can be both, and be great at both. That speech spread across corporate media platforms. Within a week, our inbox was flooded with congratulations, and Amber proudly brought the Forbes magazine featuring me to school so I can finally show off my mom without cringing. Brian was no longer the man at the head of the table, assuming he was the center. Now he's the one who checks in with me before every investment decision, and sometimes simply washes the dishes beside me after dinner. No complaints. "I'm still getting used to you being a CEO," he told me one evening as we sat in the backyard, sipping tea under the city lights. But being married to the strongest woman I've ever met, that makes me prouder than any title I've ever had. I leaned my head on his shoulder and smiled. I don't need to be celebrated. I just need to be seen. And now, finally, I am truly seen. A new journey begins. No more hiding. No more silence. I'm still the CEO. Still the mom who wakes up early to make breakfast. Still the wife who keeps our family balanced. Summer arrived, bringing sunny mornings and a lively buzz through Orion Tower. But this year held special meaning for me. Not because of record-breaking revenue or the finalized Cybernova acquisition, but because for the first time, I walked into the office with something more valuable than success. A family truly walking beside me. Amber, or rather Amber West, the name she chose for her internship at Orion, was busy preparing her first presentation. She refused any special treatment, insisting on being evaluated just like every other intern. When I asked why she chose that name, Amber smiled playfully. "I picked Grandma's last name. She was the first person who taught me women can do anything they want. After you, of course." Every morning, the two of us left the house together, carrying coffee and stories we hadn't finished the night before. Brian, now working part-time as a financial advisor, usually saw us off at the door, reminding us, "Knock 'em dead in that exec meeting today, hun." And Amber, "Don't let anyone doubt your talent just because you're her daughter." At the Monday morning meeting, Amber presented a plan to build a more user-friendly interface for older adults. An idea I had initially dismissed as a side topic, but watching her stand before the leadership team, confident and composed, I saw myself in her. The early days, nerves trembling, speaking in front of people who didn't believe I had anything beyond a neat ponytail and a polite smile. "The development team has started testing the new layout," she concluded, "and initial feedback shows a 32% increase in satisfaction. We're not just building advanced technology, we're making it accessible, whether you're 18 or 80. The room applauded. I didn't say a word, I just looked at her, heart full. The girl who once called me a boring mom was now proving to the entire company that she didn't need the Morgan name to earn respect. That evening, as we gathered for dinner, Brian suddenly stood up, holding a small box. "I don't think I've ever truly said this. Linda, thank you for not giving up on me. And thank you for giving us a second chance, not just in our marriage, but in how we parent." He opened the box to reveal a small gold nameplate engraved with "Linda Morgan, CEO, Mom Inspiration." Amber let out a whistle. "This needs to be hung right outside the main conference room." I laughed, eyes welling up. "Thank you, but I think I'll keep it in the kitchen, to remind myself that even while running an empire, I'm still the best cookie baker in this house." Amber wrapped her arms around me from behind, resting her head on my shoulder. "And the most amazing woman I've ever known." Brian nodded. "We've all learned something important. That strength isn't about the loudest voice, but the quiet persistence. And sometimes, the one holding the whole family together is the one we underestimated the most." I looked at them, my husband, my daughter, and felt more at peace than ever before. No more roles weighing us down, no more distance. We were a family, imperfect, but honest, and finally learning how to listen. A month later, Orion hosted its annual summit, the first time the full executive board and their families were invited. I stood on stage, behind me the words, "Technology leads, people make the difference." When I founded Orion, I didn't just dream of breakthrough innovation. I dreamed of a place where anyone could shine, regardless of gender, age, or where they started. I paused. I was once dismissed just because I was a mom. But being a mother taught me how to handle crises, how to see value in each person, and how to build trust. Qualities every CEO should master. The room was silent, then erupted in applause. I saw Amber in the front row, eyes glistening, Brian smiling, proud. After the summit, reporters surrounded me. One asked, "What's your secret to running a company while still being a present mother?" I answered without hesitation. "It's knowing I never had to choose. I can be a CEO, lead a billion-dollar meeting at noon, and still be home in time to bake cookies at night. And both are equally important." That night, as I stood in my familiar kitchen, pulling a batch of cookies from the oven, Amber walked in, picked one up, and took a bite. "Is this a victory cookie, Mom?" I smiled, shaking my head. "No, sweetheart, this is a family cookie. And that's always the best kind." From a mother once overlooked in her own home, I quietly built an empire no one saw coming. That journey taught me that a woman's worth isn't defined by the roles others give her, but by her resilience, wisdom, and the love she pours into her family. I no longer hide behind an apron. I'm Linda Morgan, a mother, a wife, and a CEO, and I'm proud to be all of them, completely. What do you think about Linda's journey and the transformation within her family? Share your thoughts below. Don't forget to follow the channel for more inspiring everyday stories from modern family life. My name is Jennifer. I was born just 3 minutes after my twin sister Rachel, but those 3 minutes might as well have been a lifetime, given how differently our parents treated us. Our family lived in a two-story white house in the suburbs of Nashville, Tennessee. My mother, Catherine, was a well-known real estate agent, always appearing with neatly styled hair, an expensive suit, and a phone that never left her hand. My father, Marcus, ran a small accounting office, buried in ledgers all day, rarely looking up to acknowledge his younger daughter. At first glance, we seemed like a typical middle-class family, perhaps even admirable. But only those who lived in that house knew the truth. Fairness never existed there. From a very young age, I could feel that my parents' love was never equally divided. When Rachel and I were about 4, Mom used to take us shopping on weekends, but every time we left the mall, Rachel's bags were always heavier. She got the newest Converse sneakers while I had to pretend to be excited about the discounted pair from the bottom shelf. Every time Rachel pointed at something, it almost instantly ended up in the shopping cart, and when I carefully asked, "Mom, can I have?" she'd cut me off with a cold glance. Not always, Jennifer. Our earliest birthday gifts made it clear where I stood in their hearts. Though we shared the same birthday, Rachel always got the bigger slice of cake, the prettier presents, and more people wishing her well. I remember quietly counting. 11 people hugged her. 3 hugged me, and 2 of those were housekeepers. It was the same with toys. Rachel had an entire shelf of limited edition Barbies, while I played with soft plastic dolls with thinning hair, probably from the clearance bin at the local store. Even our mini strollers were different. Hers was pink and played music. Mine was dull gray with squeaky, stuck wheels. I used to convince myself I was just imagining things, that maybe I was too sensitive. But when we started preschool, the favoritism was no longer subtle. It was impossible to deny. On the first day of class, Mom dressed us in identical uniforms, red plaid skirts, white blouses, and knee-high socks. I remember feeling excited that finally we looked the same in adults' eyes. But when Mom stood on the steps holding up her phone, I heard her voice ring out clearly. "Rachel, sweetheart, lift your chin. Tilt your head just a little. Perfect." And me? I was just a blurry shadow next to her, my eyes peeking out from behind Rachel's shoulder. After that day, everything followed a set pattern. Every afternoon, Mom would park at the school gate, open the car door, and say the familiar line, "Jennifer, go home and do your homework. I'm taking Rachel to art class." Monday was art, Tuesday piano, Wednesday dance, Thursday acting, and Friday, sometimes just ice cream to relax after a long week. I'd walk into an empty house, drop my backpack on the chair, and cook instant noodles. The only sound was the ticking clock, occasionally interrupted by the washing machine spinning loudly. When I asked why I couldn't take art classes like Rachel, Mom just sighed. "Not everyone is cut out for the arts. You should focus on doing well in school. That would be better." So I did. I studied hard. But my good grades never once made my parents pause their dinner to applaud me, the way they did when Rachel drew a cat that looked like a smudged ink blot. I started to realize something. No matter how hard I tried, I only became more invisible in my own home. Rachel was always the center, and I was just the background, a forgettable detail people looked right past. When we turned 10, Mom started talking about investing in the future. I didn't fully understand what she meant, but I listened carefully. Eventually, I realized that investment only applied to Rachel. New extracurriculars every month, violin lessons downtown, Wednesday night coding classes, weekend debate clubs. And me, I once asked if I could join a creative writing group at the local library. Without even looking up from her phone, Mom replied coldly, "Not this month, money's tight." A few days later, I saw her swipe her credit card to buy Rachel a new performance dress at a boutique downtown. I said nothing. I had learned that speaking up only earned me cold stares or carefully crafted excuses. "You don't understand. Rachel has talent. You just need to focus on your studies." So I did. I buried myself in books as the only way to prove I deserved to be seen. Math quizzes? I always got perfect scores. Essays? My teacher often used mine as the class example. I was even chosen to represent our class in the district debate, even though I had never joined a club before. But that night at dinner, when I proudly told everyone I'd be representing the school, Mom barely nodded before turning to Rachel. "Sweetheart, how was art class today?" I remember going silent, my hand gripping the fork, lips pressed together so I wouldn't say something I'd regret. I started writing everything down in a journal hidden under my pillow. Every comment that hurt, every moment I was ignored, every time I wondered, if I didn't exist, would anything be different? The answer came on a cloudy night when I crept downstairs for a glass of water after studying late. The house was strangely quiet. Light spilled from the living room, and I slowed my steps. I heard my father's voice, low and tired, as if shedding a mask. "Do you think we really need to try with both girls?" he asked. Mom sighed. "Jennifer's fine. She can handle herself. See? She runs without being pushed. But Rachel's different. She needs us to push, to guide. She has potential, Marcus. She was born to shine." "What about Jennifer?" My father's voice lowered. "Have you ever thought that if we only had Rachel, life would have been less stressful?" I stood frozen in the hallway. My chest felt tight, like my heart had been squeezed. I bit my lip to stop myself from crying out loud. "She's a good kid," my mother said, her voice softer. "But sometimes, I feel like having just one would have been enough." I turned around and ran to my room. The notebook under my pillow was no longer a place for memories. That night, I tore out each page and threw them slowly into the trash. With every sheet I dropped, it felt like I was letting go of the last pieces of faith I had left. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I didn't ask why. I just sat there, staring at the ceiling where those glow-in-the-dark stars we once stuck up as kids still hung. I counted them. Rachel had 27 stars. I had only 13. Even the sky above my bed was divided unfairly. But I swore to myself, if they couldn't see me while I was right in front of them, then someday, they'd have no choice but to look up. When I was standing tall, where no one could ignore me. After that night, I felt reborn. I no longer longed for Mom to pat my head when I got a good grade, or for Dad to ask how school was going. I stopped trying to be seen. Instead, I started studying for myself. I spent most of my time in the school library. I arrived earlier than anyone, stayed later than everyone. I read more than the textbooks required, took neat notes, practiced sample tests that others never bothered to look at. The teachers noticed. Mr. Brandt, our history teacher, called on me for the first time in class. "Jennifer, what's your opinion on Roosevelt's New Deal policy?" I looked up, a bit surprised. Then I started answering, point by point with examples I had prepared the night before. When I finished, the class was silent for a few seconds, before he nodded slowly. "Very good. Precise, insightful, and articulate." I caught Rachel glancing at me, her eyes filled with disbelief, as if she had just witnessed something unnatural. That surprise quickly turned into irritation. When my English essay was posted on the board as a model, Rachel mumbled to her friend next to her. "The teachers are clearly biased. They probably feel sorry for her, that's why they're praising her." More and more, teachers began to trust me. Ms. Lane asked me to lead our end-of-term discussion group. Mr. Reynolds nominated me for the state academic competition team. Rachel reacted more strongly each time. She'd tap her pen angrily on her desk whenever I was praised, or deliberately voiced opposing opinions during debates, even if they barely made sense. And one day, I walked into class and noticed Rachel wasn't at her seat. The room felt different. Students were whispering. The principal had just left. Miss Lane waved me into the hallway. "Jennifer, there's something you should know," she said gently, still composed. "Your mother came to the school. She's in the principal's office. Rachel told her that teachers were intentionally favoring you to make her feel small." I stood still. I wasn't surprised Rachel said that, but I hadn't expected Mom to actually show up at school. I walked quietly past the office and peeked through the glass. There she was, Catherine Harper, in a plum-colored business dress, arms crossed, pointing at some documents the principal was trying to explain. Rachel is an outstanding student, but Jennifer, all she does is bury herself in books. She's not a leader. She's not creative. Pushing her like this is only hurting my daughter." The principal stayed calm. "Mrs. Harper, we have clear academic records. Jennifer ranks highest in 4 core subjects. All her teachers unanimously agree." I heard my mother say, "Grades aren't everything. Your teachers are clearly biased." A few minutes later, she left the office. I ducked into the side hallway before she could see me, but inside, something had gone cold. That night, I heard her footsteps as she returned home. Rachel's door opened, then closed again. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I heard their soft laughter, the kind I'd never once heard directed at me. The next morning, when I arrived at school, a small envelope was on the teacher's desk. I didn't need to open it to know what it said, but Mr. Brandt spoke before I could react. "Jennifer, don't let outside noise get to you. You deserve every bit of recognition you're receiving." I nodded, keeping my voice steady. "I know, and I won't stop." I returned to my desk, opened my notebook. On the first page, I had written a line I reminded myself of every day. "They may not choose me, but I will choose myself." From that moment on, I didn't just study to escape the darkness. I studied to become the light. When I turned 16, I decided to get a part-time job at a bakery 3 blocks from home. It was a small shop called Sugar Bloom, with cream-colored walls and the scent of butter cookies always hanging in the air. The owner, Martha, was in her 40s, usually tied her hair with a silk scarf, and always wore a warm smile. I didn't tell Mom. I knew she wouldn't approve. To her, getting a job at this age meant you have no direction. But to me, it meant a little bit of freedom in a world where I was rarely allowed to choose. That evening, wearing my pale pink apron and hair tied up neatly, I walked out the door. Rachel glanced up from her phone and smirked. "Going to be a waitress? Cool. Just try not to drop cake on someone's dress." I didn't answer, but inside I knew. I had just taken my first step out of the shadow they kept forcing me into. After a few weeks, I managed to save my first small paycheck. It wasn't much, but enough for me to buy the books I loved without second thoughts. One evening, while looking for modern social change in America in Mom's office bookshelf, I accidentally knocked over a stack of old folders. While cleaning up, I found a worn, light brown notebook. The first page had a handwritten note. "Emergency contacts, do not use." I flipped through a few pages and stopped at an entry labeled "Clara and Henry Whitmore, no contact, number blocked." Below it was a handwritten address in the southern part of the city I'd never heard of before. Clara Whitmore? I whispered the name to myself all night. The surname matched Mom's maiden name. Henry? Maybe my grandfather? But why had I never heard of them? The next day, while Mom and Rachel were off at their weekend spa appointment, I took bus 14 to the address in the notebook. It led me to a small, sky-blue wooden house with a short white fence and a front yard full of blooming yellow daisies. The house was modest, simple, but full of life. I hesitated a few seconds before knocking. A petite woman with silver hair opened the door. She stared at me, her expression shifting from surprise to confusion. "Who are you?" she asked softly. I swallowed hard, my heart pounding. "I'm Jennifer Harper. I think you might be my grandmother?" She raised her hand to her mouth and stepped back slightly, as if she was seeing a ghost from her past. Behind her, a man with snowy white hair and thick glasses appeared, holding a cup of tea. When he saw me, he almost dropped it. "Clara, look closely. It's her. It's our granddaughter." None of us said a word for several minutes. Then Grandma Clara pulled me into the house, wrapping me in a hug so tight, it felt like she was afraid I might disappear. That little house was like a whole different world compared to the cold one I grew up in. The walls were covered with hand-drawn pictures and old photographs. The scent of apple pie lingered in the air. They invited me to sit at the dining table, poured me a cup of hot tea, and began asking me question after question. They knew who I was, but had never had the chance to meet me. After your mother got married, she said we were too old-fashioned, that we didn't fit her new lifestyle, Grandpa Henry said. And then she cut us off. We called, wrote letters, but never heard back. You're the first to come find us, Grandma Clara said, her eyes red. We used to dream of taking you to the zoo, teaching you how to bake, but then I didn't say a word. My throat was tight. I didn't have the heart to tell them that I had only learned their names less than 24 hours ago. I stayed until evening, helped Grandma wash dishes, and listened to Grandpa tell stories from his youth. Before I left, he handed me a small envelope for bus fare. And if you'd like, next time, stay for dinner. On the way home, I opened the envelope. Inside, along with a bit of cash, was a handwritten note. You are always welcome here, always. I held on to that note all night. For the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged somewhere that didn't require conditions or achievements, just me, as I was. Graduation day came faster than I expected. The last months of senior year flew by in a blur of heavy schedules, final exams, and late nights studying at the library. And then, that morning, I stood on the stage of West Haven High's auditorium in a navy blue gown, listening to the announcer call my name as the valedictorian of the class of 2024. Applause echoed through the room, but when I looked down at the row reserved for parents, I saw my mother looking at her phone, and my father chatting with Rachel, who sighed loudly like I had just stolen her spotlight. I walked up to the podium, accepted my diploma, and gave my short thank you speech. My voice was steady, every word clear, but inside I felt strangely hollow. That evening there was no celebration, no balloons, no cake, no congratulations Jennifer sign. Just an ordinary dinner, grilled fish and salad. My mom told Rachel to cut back on fried food to stay fit for the upcoming trip, and Dad talked about a difficult client at work. No one mentioned me, even though I had just graduated top of the class. After I finished washing the dishes and was heading upstairs, Mom suddenly called out. Her voice was unusually excited. Jennifer, sit down. I have some good news. I sat down slowly, tilting my head slightly, hoping for something unexpected. We're going to Hawaii, a 5-day vacation in Maui to celebrate Rachel's graduation, Mom announced like she was revealing the winner of a game show. Rachel smiled, not forgetting to give me a smug little look. I froze. We means who? I asked slowly. Mom waved her hand like it was no big deal. Oh, your dad, me, and Rachel. I only booked 3 tickets. You know how expensive flights are this time of year. Plus, someone has to stay home and keep working at the bakery. I looked her straight in the eyes. So you mean I'm staying behind? Alone. She placed a hand on my shoulder, her expression like she was comforting a child who just dropped their ice cream. You understand. You're strong, independent. We trust you. I didn't say another word. I stood up, nodded like a machine, and quietly went upstairs. The next morning, when I heard the car door slam shut, I peeked out the window. They were loading suitcases into the trunk. Rachel wore a cream maxi dress, her hair softly curled, holding her plane ticket and favorite latte. Mom waved up at me. Rachel beamed. I'll tag you in my beach pics, okay? Don't be jealous. The car door closed, and their SUV slowly pulled out of the driveway. I turned away, picked up my phone, and for the first time in months, I called the number saved under a simple name. Grandma and Grandpa. Grandma Clara's voice answered, warm and steady as always. I couldn't hold back the tears. They left. I choked. They just left me, like I'm nothing. Oh, sweetheart, don't cry. Come over right now. We're going to throw you the graduation celebration you truly deserve. I arrived at their house by noon. That little home was decorated with white and blue ribbons, balloons hanging from the windows. The table was covered with a white cloth, and on it sat a chocolate cake with frosting that read, Congratulations, Jennifer, our amazing valedictorian. But that wasn't all. After a lunch filled with all my favorite dishes, crispy baked lasagna and fruit salad, Grandpa Henry placed a small black box on the table. You've done something very few people ever do. We're so proud of you, and this is our gift to you. I opened the box. Inside was a brand new car key, with a keychain engraved with the words, "Always believe in your own path." My eyes widened. You're kidding, right? Grandpa smiled and pointed toward the window. In the front yard sat a milk-white Audi Q3, sparkling new. The license plate hadn't been installed yet, and the documents were still tucked in a plastic sleeve hanging behind the seat. That car is yours, a graduation gift from us, Grandma Clara said, holding my hand. We've been planning this for a long time, just waiting for the right moment. I hugged them tightly, tears streaming down my face, but no longer from pain. For the first time in my life, I felt like I didn't have to bleed for recognition. 2 weeks passed after their trip to Hawaii, and I lived in days more peaceful and warm than any vacation I had ever imagined. In the mornings, I drove my new Audi to Sugar Bloom Bakery, bringing butter cookies for my grandparents. In the evenings, I helped Grandma Clara prepare dinner, while Grandpa Henry read the paper and told stories from his days as an engineer. For the first time, I felt at ease, no longer straining to earn affection. The Audi parked neatly in front of our house, a quiet symbol of something my parents had never given me: recognition, trust, and unconditional love. And then the day I had predicted finally came. It was a mild Friday afternoon in Nashville. I was reading on the porch with a cup of chamomile tea still warm in my hands when the familiar SUV slowly pulled into the driveway. The three of them stepped out, Mom in a purple silk maxi dress, Dad with his sunglasses on, and Rachel, of course, in a designer outfit, dragging her suitcase like she was arriving on a red carpet. Her Mom was the first to see the car. She froze mid-step, lips pressed tight, her eyes moving from the Audi logo to the temporary tag, then to the chrome side mirrors. Rachel squinted, shielding her eyes from the sun, then turned to me. Whose car is that? I stood up, smiling softly. Mine. Dad walked closer, his voice slower. Jennifer, are you joking? That car costs over 40 grand. I nodded, pulled the key from my pocket and twirled it around my finger. Just like Rachel used to do with her designer purse straps. A graduation gift, from Grandma Clara and Grandpa Henry. Silence fell for a few seconds. My mother's face changed color faster than when she saw the stock market drop. She immediately grabbed her phone, dialing so quickly her hands were almost shaking. Dad stood frozen, and Rachel let out a short laugh, half mocking, half unsure. The call connected. Clara, it's Catherine. I need an explanation. You bought Jennifer a car? Do you even realize what this implies? I could hear Grandma Clara's voice clearly over speaker. Warm, calm, unfazed. Hello, dear. Did you enjoy your Hawaii vacation? That has nothing to do with this. How could you even afford that? All this time. We've kept quiet because we don't need to show off, Catherine. She cut in gently but firmly. After you cut us off, we invested in a few tech ventures. Now, we live comfortably and have chosen to use the rest to support someone who truly values family. Mom gripped the phone tighter. Jennifer is my granddaughter, but so is Rachel. If there's a gift, it should be fair. She needs a car too. She's getting ready for college. I almost laughed. She'd just got back from Hawaii, tan and covered in Instagram check-ins, and now she wanted fairness? Then Grandpa Henry's voice came in, deep and steady. Catherine, fairness is a good thing, but you seem to have forgotten that fairness must come with love. Jennifer has never been treated like a daughter by you. Now, we've chosen her as our heir. All our assets, savings, and property will be in her name. Rachel's eyes widened, and my father murmured, Catherine? You haven't spoken to them in years. How could you know they even had that kind of wealth? Mom stood frozen, the phone still to her ear, but nothing more was said. The line had gone dead. Her eyes darkened and she turned to me. Jennifer, you need to think carefully. You know Rachel needs the car for school. You're just working at a bakery. You don't need something this fancy. I stepped closer, popped open the trunk. The suitcases I had packed 2 days earlier sat neatly inside. I pulled out an envelope and handed it to her. Inside is a copy of my acceptance letter from Columbia University. I received a full scholarship, tuition, housing, living expenses, all covered. And no, I won't be working at the bakery forever. But at least I'll never have to trade my dignity for affection. Rachel wasn't smiling anymore. Dad said nothing, just looked at me like he had lost something he never realized was important. I had just opened the car door when Mom stepped in front of it, arms crossed, eyes sharp, like she was about to deliver a lecture. Jennifer, you can't keep that car, she said coldly, her patience clearly gone. Rachel is the one who needs it for school. She just got into State University. And you? Aren't you just working at a bakery? I looked up at her, gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I don't work at the bakery anymore. And I'm not staying here. Dad finally spoke, his voice low and pressuring. Jennifer, you need to be realistic. Rachel has a college plan, a social network, a future. She needs the car to build that. And you? What do you have? I reached into my bag, pulled out a neatly clipped folder, and handed it to him. An acceptance letter from Columbia, with a full scholarship, covers tuition, housing, and living expenses. They both stood speechless for a few seconds. Rachel stopped typing on her phone, turning to me as if she couldn't believe what she had just heard. Columbia? My mom repeated, her voice suddenly quieter. You mean New York? I nodded. Yes. I'll be studying law and social policy. Classes start in 3 weeks. But why didn't you say anything? Dad asked. For the first time in my life, I saw genuine confusion in his eyes. I shrugged. Because I already knew what you'd say. We can't afford it, it's not necessary, save it for Rachel. I looked up, locking eyes with Mom. But my grandparents believed in me. They thought I was worth it. Rachel stepped forward, arms crossed, scoffing. What about the car? You're seriously taking that to New York? Where are you going to park it? Right outside your dorm? Trying to make a scene? I turned back, opened the trunk, revealing 2 large suitcases, a tote bag, and a neatly wrapped laptop. I had been ready long before they returned. Don't worry, I said, closing the trunk. You won't have to see it, because I won't be coming back. Mom stood speechless, then suddenly changed her tone. Jennifer, listen to me. Don't overreact. I just want what's best for both of you. Every family plays favorites sometimes, but that doesn't mean we don't love you. I shook my head, lips pressed tightly. Love can't be one-sided. I can't keep living with that kind of a little bit anymore. My dad stepped forward, placing his hand on the car door. If you drive that car away, you'll be on your own. No one here will help you anymore. I looked at him, really looked, and for the first time I saw the conditions behind everything they'd ever called help. And I knew. I was ready to let it go. I'll take responsibility for my own life, one step at a time. I closed the door and started the engine. Rachel stood with her hands on her hips, trying to smirk, but her eyes betrayed her. My mom turned away, staring at the concrete driveway like she was searching for a comeback she couldn't find. My dad still stood there, his hand now off the car but not stepping back. Jennifer? He said. His voice, for once, without command. If you ever feel overwhelmed, you can... I'll be okay. I cut him off with a small nod. And this time, I don't need anyone to confirm that. I pressed the gas. The Audi rolled slowly away from the familiar driveway. In the rearview mirror, I saw them, those 3 figures still standing there, growing smaller in the distance. The road ahead didn't promise to be easy, but it was mine, not handed to me, not paved by anyone else. Each step forward was a step of true freedom. I left Nashville on a late summer morning, the sky unusually clear. The Audi glided along the interstate, and ahead of me opened a brand new chapter. New York City, Columbia University, youthful dreams, and a completely new life waiting to unfold. My grandparents insisted on driving behind me in Grandpa Henry's old sedan. They didn't say much, but I knew every time I looked in the mirror, they were still there. Steady, silent, and full of faith. Before we parted ways, Grandma Clara hugged me tightly outside the dorm gates. "You've gone farther than anyone ever imagined," she said, her warm eyes glowing with pride. "And you never had to do it alone." I smiled, burying my face on her shoulder. I had never felt so protected, even though I was officially on my own now. College life swept me into a completely new rhythm. Classes at Columbia were challenging, with brilliant professors and classmates from all over the world. I worked part-time at a small bookstore near Brooklyn, where the smell of old pages and the soft jingle of the front door brought me more peace than anything else. I began building a life where I didn't need to look over my shoulder for permission. No more judgmental stares, no more subtle comparisons masked in sweet words. Here, I was Jennifer, not Rachel's little sister, not the obedient one, just me. A few weeks later, Grandma Clara called me with news that didn't surprise me. "They came by this morning," she said, her voice calm, as if savoring each word. "Brought a fruit basket and plenty of apologies." I stayed silent for a moment. "What did they say?" "They said they missed you, that the family should come together again, that Rachel is struggling with tuition and thought, maybe we could help." I clenched the phone, but Grandma Clara's voice remained steady. "We invited them in, made tea, but didn't say much. And after they left, your grandpa and I agreed, everything. The property, savings, bank accounts, it's all going to you." I sat still in my dorm room, the afternoon light streaming through the window onto my law textbooks. I didn't know what I felt. Bitterness, vindication, or sadness. "Grandma," I whispered, "are you sure? I don't need—" "It's not because you need it," she interrupted, gentle but firm. "It's because you deserve it. You're the only one who never treated us like a burden." Tears welled up. In that moment, I knew. True love never comes with conditions. I didn't respond to the message my mom sent 2 days later, her first text in over a month. She used that familiar tone. "I know you're upset, but we're still family, right?" I wasn't upset anymore. I didn't feel resentment. I simply no longer felt the need to hold on to something that was never really mine. I hit block contact without hesitation. Time flew in New York. I adjusted better than I expected. My new friends, Layla, an Egyptian-American journalism major, and Ethan, an economics student from Oregon, made me feel truly valued. We studied together at Butler Library, grabbed midnight pizza from the corner shop, and on some nights sat on the dorm balcony, watching the city lights sparkle, dreaming about the future, like it was all within reach. One Sunday night, after closing the bookstore, I got a message from Ethan. "Coffee on the corner, 9 p.m. I've already got us a table." I looked at my phone and smiled. No more pressure to prove myself. No more comparisons. No more hunger for love that came only with pity. I had my life, a beginning that wasn't perfect, but an ending shaped by my own choice. I chose myself, chose peace, and chose to move forward without looking back. From my own story, I've realized that not every wound needs healing through forgiveness. Sometimes what we really need is to let go. I once tried so hard to be acknowledged, but I found my worth only when I stopped seeking validation from those who never truly valued me. Family isn't just where we come from. It's where we're loved without conditions. And true happiness begins the moment we find the courage to choose ourselves. What do you think of Jennifer's decision? Should she have forgiven her family? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt and meaningful family stories.